Welcome to the Veterinary Culture Lab, where science meets real-world application. I'm Andi Davison.
And I'm Josh Weissman. Together, we'll show you an evidence-based blueprint for renovating culture in your veterinary team, one episode at a time.
In this episode, Josh and I unpack the science behind generational work values and challenge that lazy young people narrative, exploring what is actually shifting in vet med and how leaders can redefine commitment without glorifying burnout. Hello there, Josh. I know that our listeners can't see you right now, but I can. And I'm going to paint the picture for them right now because, listeners, not only am I joined by the one and only amazing Josh Weissman, I am also joined today by a little furry friend who is perched on his shoulder. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what that is all about?
Yeah, I'm enacting a Portlandia episode.
One of the best episodes out there.
Put a bird on it. Yes, my little feathered friend here, this is Dalia. Dalia is a dusky pyonis, which every time I say it to somebody who doesn't know birds or doesn't know all the different species, they probably think I'm saying a inappropriate word.
Your mom's a dusky pyonis.
Yeah, well done. Well done. Pionus, pyonis. I had to think about that for a second. She's a small little parrot. The joke that we have here, my wife and I, is like, Colorado has some really pretty sunrises and sunsets, and usually like the sunrises are like shades of purples and pinks, and we say it's just like the colors of a dusky pyonis. So that's kind of what Dalia looks like. I've had Dalia for 20-ish years now, and yeah, she hasn't really gotten a lot of attention the last couple days, so I figured I'd take her out.
Well, I'm excited that she's going to join us.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, that's great. How have you been otherwise?
Actually not really great. My aura's been telling me that my readiness score is super low. I'm worried I'm getting a little bit sick, and it's very strange. It's like manifesting in really weird ways. I wake up every 90 minutes in the middle of the night. I don't know why. And all I can seem to do is tell airplane jokes. I'm a little worried that it's terminal.
Well done. Well played. Well played. Yeah.
How are you, Andi?
I'm not that prepared for a joke, but I'm doing well.
You're getting on an airplane in a few days.
Yeah, I was going to say, speaking of airplanes, which is probably why I didn't even go there, because I was like, yes, airplane is on my brain too, because as we record this, I am mentally preparing for a 15-hour flight to Africa on Saturday. And I'm really, really looking forward to it because I'm headed over to Zimbabwe to support the Worldwide Vets Organization in their Thrive Wellbeing Retreat. And it is my third year going, and I couldn't be more excited. And I could very easily spend the rest of this podcast time talking about how wonderful of an experience it is. So maybe we'll talk about that again in the future. But I'll absolutely put a link to the website and all the things in the chat because it is a well-being retreat for veterinary professionals in the bush of Zimbabwe, where we get to have conversations about resilience and optimism, communication. There's some personality science that comes into that as well with one of the other facilitators. And I am beyond honored and delighted to be back facilitating with them. So I will absolutely put a link in the chat. I will absolutely be sending pictures and posting stories and all of those things that many of you will likely have seen by now. So, 10 out of 10 recommend.
2 thumbs up. Just to make this clear for listeners, how amazing this actually is. You and I were just at Western recently, Western Veterinary Conference. And, that's one of the bigger conferences. And of course, you go to these conferences, you go to these lectures, you're getting your CE, and sometimes there's distractions. I don't know, somebody's phone rings, right? How about being in the middle of a continuing education lecture and being distracted by a herd of elephants?
Mm-hmm.
That's Thrive.
Yeah.
Pretty cool. Pretty cool
no
stuff.
Coffee
I'm excited
breaks.
for you to go.
There's elephant breaks and hippo breaks.
Elephant breaks and hippo breaks.
Yep.
That's the best.
Yep. Yeah. All right. Well, given that I could talk about this for the whole rest of our time, I won't. And I will pivot because, Josh, there is something that I actually do want to focus on today. And to be honest with you, it's something that might make some people shift around a little uncomfortably in their seat. Because I've been hearing some version of this statement quite a bit lately. You know, these younger generations, they just don't seem to want to work. And every time I hear it, I pause. I mean, is it just me, Josh, or have you been hearing this stuff as well?
No, I've never heard that, Andy.
Yeah.
Massive joke there. Yeah, I hear it all the time. It's honestly, it's often more often than not, it comes up in conversations, especially when I'm talking to people like in leadership and management positions, and they're telling me about their teams. And invariably, it comes down to, the young ones these days, these darn kids. Yeah, I hear it a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally same. Like same. And the thing that I notice about it is the people saying it, right? They're usually, how I put this, our age.
So 25.
Right. Just spring chickens. But it's true because as much as I hate to admit it and as many jokes as I make about it, I'm getting kind of old. And I remember the days of dial-up internet. I used to burn CDs off of FrostWire, and I absolutely printed out MapQuest directions like a pirate when I needed to go somewhere. Now, we're not ancient, you and I, but we're definitely not the youth anymore. And that's important because what I'm hearing in veterinary clinics right now is some version of these new grads don't have a work ethic, or they just don't want to hustle, and they're not committed. All they want to do is come here and then go home. And before I go any further, I do want to share a story because I don't know, this one always stands out to me, and I think it will to you too. A couple of years ago, I was working in a practice and had hired a brand new technician. Early 20s, totally sharp, wildly capable, asked thoughtful questions, and was really great with our clients. Now, about 3 months in, one of the senior team members, she came into my office and she said, "Hey, Andi, do you have a minute? I'd really like to talk with you." And I was like, yeah, no problem. She came in, she sat down, she closed the door. That made me know that something was up, right? She closed the door and she said, I'm not really sure that this new tech is going to make it. She leaves every day at 6:00. And I remember thinking, oh, okay, tell me more. And the senior tech shared with me that apparently she would finish up her treatments, update her records, check in really quick with the DVM, and then at 5:58, she was getting all of her stuff together, and at 6:00, she was walking to her car. No lingering, no last-minute extra tasks, no I'll squeeze in just one more thing. And it felt really wrong for this senior tech and for the majority of my team, to be honest. So I asked the new tech about it directly. And she said something to me that I will never forget. She said, "I watched my mom burn out on nursing. I watched her cry in the kitchen after 12-hour shifts. And you know what, Andi? I love animals too much to let this job take over my whole life." That hit me square in the chest. I love animals too much to let this job take over my whole life. She wasn't disengaged. She was intentional. She was protecting her sustainability. And I remember sitting there listening to her and thinking, wow, this is an amazing thing for a young professional to be saying to their boss. And it got me thinking, Josh, when you were in your 20s, would you have had the courage to say something like that out loud?
No, not even a little bit. I remember a job I had in my 20s, and I had a boss who very much had the expectation that when you're on the clock, everything here comes first. You don't have a life outside of this place. I mean, he wouldn't say these things, but this is what it felt like to me. It felt like when you're here, I own you, and you do what needs to be done, no matter how long it takes and no matter how hard you had to work. And I remember definitely having days where it was man, I don't think I can handle hour 15. But no, I would never have the courage to say that to him because, oh my God, I was terrified of what kind of response I would get from him and the anger that would ensue and put my job at risk and all those kinds of things. So not at all, not even a little.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a lot of similar experiences. And that is what I think made that sting a little bit for me, because when I was in my 20s, I mean, if we're being honest, in my 30s and my 40s, I wore staying late like a badge of honor, right? I willingly skipped lunches. I felt obligated to cover shifts. I picked up overtime without blinking, and I felt proud when I was exhausted, because exhaustion meant commitment. And I remember the older generations looking at us and saying, gosh, these young people today are all so entitled. They want to do everything fast. They don't want to pay their dues. Does that sound familiar? Because now we're the ones saying that about the generations coming up behind us. We became the elders. When did that happen?
For real, dude.
Ugh, I know. But it brings up a question that I really want to hold on to today. And that's thinking more about whether or not this is a work ethic crisis or a values shift. Because the research that we're going to unpack today suggests something really important. Work centrality, or how much of your identity is wrapped up in your job, it's shifted across the generations. Leisure and balance are valued differently. Boundaries are handled differently. And while those small shifts are small, right? Subtle, not catastrophic, culturally, they can feel seismic, especially in veterinary medicine. Because this profession has a really long history of martyrdom, overfunctioning, and quietly tolerating burnout at the cost of caring. Now, I don't know how many of our listeners are James Herriot fans, but I'm a huge James Herriot fan. In fact, my horse farm is called Skelldale Farms. And listeners, if you know James Herriot, you'll know that Skelldale was the name of their veterinary practice, Skelldale House. And that's why I call it Skelldale Farms. But I grew up listening to the books, well, reading the books when my mom read them to me, and watching the TV series, the one in the 80s with Robert Hardy. So good. All Creatures Great and Small, right? And I remember James's boss, Mr. Farnan's famous saying, anytime things got busy, overwhelming, or chaotic, you must attend. Sick puppy during Christmas supper? You must attend. 2 a.m. downer cow in the middle of winter? You must attend. Mrs. Pomfrey calls right after you've locked up for the day? You must attend. And that's the mentality that we grew up with, that vet med grew up being told that you must attend. So when a younger team member says, I'm happy to work during my shift, but then I'm going to go home, that feels like a rebellion. But what if it's an adaptation? Because Gen Z and some of the younger millennials, they grew up watching economic instability, a global pandemic, rising awareness of mental health, and an entire profession that now, wonderfully, is talking openly about burnout. And if you watched your mentors flame out, wouldn't you want to design your career a bit differently? I know I would. So, Josh, if you were starting over today, knowing what you know now, what might you do differently?
Yeah, it's a really lovely question. So I was for a long time Mr. Farnan. I think back to the hospitals that I owned and managed, and I definitely, whether I recognized it or not at the time, sometimes explicitly, more often implicitly, had that you must attend expectation. And so, going back, I wish I wasn't like that. I would have definitely changed that, both for myself and for the team. And I probably would have had a lot more explicit conversations about boundaries and what felt appropriate to people and what expectations looked like in the workplace and how the workplace could meet their expectations of their personal boundaries and support those kinds of things, so that we established, a really clear mutual understanding of what the hospital needed of them and what the hospital was willing to give in return so that they could care for themselves. I didn't do a good job at the sustainability part, not just as a boss, but also in how I showed up. I have distinct recollections of driving 150 plus miles a day to and from work and working 10, 12, 14-hour shifts, 6 or 7 days a week. That's not sustainable, but it also set a tone, right? For if the owner is doing that, then well, what must I have to do? And I wonder often how many people didn't have the courage to say the things to me that technician said to you. So those were all things I would do differently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. The big thing that stands out with me in what you shared, which I appreciate that, right? Because that's a really vulnerable to be, wishing that we had done something differently and knowing now what we could have known then or what we would have been more helpful back then. But the thing that stands out to me about what you shared is the word balance, right? How to better balance the expectations, how to better balance people's priorities so that sustainability was possible. And that's the shift right there, right? Because most of us have had to learn sustainability after burnout. This newer generation is trying to build it from the beginning. So maybe the better question is not, why are they so lazy and entitled? Maybe it's, what are they responding to and trying to protect? And if we're getting serious about renovating veterinary cultures, we really have to get curious about what that is. Which is why I'm really looking forward to sharing this paper with you and our listeners. Because if we're going to challenge the narrative of this common thing that happens in vet med, we're going to need way more than our opinion. We need data. So today we're going to look at the 2016 paper by Jean Twenge, that I'm definitely mispronouncing, and her colleagues, titled Generational Differences in Work Values. Now, this was not a small study. This is what is called a cross-temporal meta-analysis, which basically means the researchers did not just compare boomers, Gen X, and millennials at one point in time. They analyzed data collected across multiple decades. So we're not just talking about vibes, we're talking about measurable trends in how work values have shifted over time. The core question that they asked here was simple. Are there meaningful generational differences in work ethic and work values? And more specifically, they wanted to know, do younger generations value work less? Are they less motivated? Or are they prioritizing different things? They analyzed respective databases that included tens of thousands of participants over multiple time periods. And in doing this, they looked at 4 primary categories of work values. The first one they looked at was extrinsic values. Think money, status, prestige. Then they looked at intrinsic values, which are those internal motivators, right? How important is our work? Are we learning something from our work? Is it interesting to us? They looked at leisure values, or the desire for work-life balance and time outside of work. And then, of course, they looked at social values, which involved relationships and contributing to others. They then measured something called work centrality, which essentially is how central is your work to your identity. Is work the core of who you are, or is it just a part of your larger life? Now, when it comes to the result, this is where things get kind of interesting, because first, they found that there was no dramatic collapse in work ethic. I'm going to say it again, a little bit louder for the people in the back. There was no dramatic collapse in work ethic. Younger generations were not shown to be universally less hardworking. So what did shift? They found that 2 things shifted in these generations. That work centrality has decreased over time. That work is less likely to be that central defining identity of a person's life. Hey there, is this conversation landing with you? If it is, I'm willing to bet you're not alone. So why not follow the podcast and maybe share this episode with some of your fellow vet crew? Together, we can all be part of a community that believes that thriving in vet med is possible and actively works to build the profession that we deserve. And if you're ready to take the next step, check out our upcoming Flourish Masterclass, the Certificate in Applied Veterinary Resilience. Check out the links in the show notes for details, and let's get back to the lab. They also found that the leisure values increased, where the younger generations are now placing higher importance on balance, flexibility, and time outside of work. Now, there were also some small shifts in extrinsic and intrinsic motivators, things like money, achievement, and meaningful work. But here's the word I really want to sit with: modest. The changes were modest. We're not talking about cliff dives in character, right? We're talking about gradual recalibration. And in research terms, that means that the differences are measurable, but not massive. It's a slight turning of the dial, not a total collapse of the system. This is why this matters, because when generations believe that work should sit at the very center of life, and the next believes that work is important, but not all-consuming, that shift may be statistically small, but culturally, it can feel enormous, especially in veterinary medicine, because this profession was built on that you must attend mentality. Work was not just something that we did, it was who we were. So when a younger team member approaches work differently, it can kind of feel like a rebellion. But what if it's simply answering a question differently? That question of calling. If that work centrality is a little bit lower and leisure is valued a bit higher, does that automatically equal laziness? It could mean that work is one part identity, not the whole thing, because sustainability matters. Burnout is no longer considered noble. And that's the nuance. The differences are real, and they are subtle. They also can feel dramatic when it comes to our culture. So when I look at this research, what I hear is not young people do not want to work. What I hear is they may not want to work as much because they don't want it to consume their identity. So, Josh, that was a lot of research that I just rattled off and shared with you. And I'd love to know what stands out to you about all of that.
Oh my gosh. How much time do we have? So many things. So many things. Andi, I'm rolling around a few things in my head. One of them is that similar research that I've looked at across generations, because this generational stigma kind of has bothered me for a while. And so I've looked at a lot of other research. And one of the things that I find very interesting is that over and over and over and over again, research like this finds what this particular paper is suggesting, that generational differences are maybe really relatively infinitesimal, and there aren't work ethic differences between generations. There are just shifts in values over time. There's a couple things that stand out to me in that. First of all, one of them is that also relates to each generation as they age. So what I mean by that is that generationally, like we can look at all boomers if you wanted to, and we would probably find differences in value structure, approach to work from when they were 20 to when they were 60 within the same generation. So that's a very common shift, and that's something that we forget. We're really good at sort of assuming that who we are today is who we always were and who we will always be, and that is not true. We are very different across our lifespan. And so we lose sight of the fact that actually when I was 20, I was kind of itching to get out of work, and I was the one that was looking at the clock and getting ready to bolt out the door 2 minutes before, the end of the shift. The other thing is this impact of confirmation bias that happens so often. And I've seen it in myself too. We're all guilty of this. Our brains are just built this way. But I think being aware of it and recognizing it is really important. We might work with 20-year-olds. And one of them is the one that's grabbing their bags and ready to go 2 minutes before the end of the shift. And that just for us confirms that this generation is entitled and lazy. And we fail to recognize that the other 19 are not doing it. And so even within, quote, different generations, there is a wide variance of how these different values and approaches manifest. And absolutely, I can find somebody who's 20 years old who acts as if they're entitled and lazy. But I can definitely find countless people in that age frame who are the opposite. Vice versa, I can find you a 60-year-old who is entitled and lazy. And so that's the point, is that just because you were born in a particular year doesn't mean you're going to be a particular way. So these are the things that stand out to me. I'm really stoked that you brought this paper to today's conversation. It's very cool.
Yeah. Well, what I think I'm hearing you say is it's not fair, and I will use that word, it's not fair to lump everybody into a group. I mean, you said it great. Just because you were born in this generation, that doesn't mean that you're, lazy or entitled, or that you're a super hard worker, or that you are, it doesn't really matter one way or another. Like, everybody is an individual, and everybody has their own individual motivators, their own individual work ethics, their own individual values. And sometimes it's not, no, it's not. I'm not even going to say sometimes. It's not fair to lump them all in the same group with the they just don't want to work and they are way too busy focusing on what time they're leaving or, what's happening after work.
Yeah. To play off of that, Andi, I don't think that generationality, I don't know how to put this, whatever year you were born is not a genetic feature of who you are.
Mm-hmm.
However, we are individuals subject to both our like internal world, so our biology, our our mindset, so on and so forth, but we're also subject to the pressures of our external world.
Right.
And so somebody born in 1970 is born into a vastly different world than somebody that was born in 2000. And that's just the reality. I mean, society has changed. Technology has changed. How we interact and how cosmopolitan we are have changed. The things we have access to and we don't have access to have changed. Those are all pressures that are going to change the inner workings of an individual born into those two very different worlds. And I think sometimes we lose sight of that too, that we think that we're all just human beings. And when we were born, it doesn't really matter. And so therefore we should all be exactly the same. I'm sorry, but bullshit. No.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We aren't, and we won't ever be. And so for me, like one of the big takeaways from this kind of stuff is like, I feel like we have sort of two options. Like, when we're in a position, we're looking around at those damn younger generations, right? We can sit there and complain about something that we have zero control over. We can ruminate on it and let it completely ruin our day and our lived experience. Or we can accept that, yeah, this is the way things are, and we can adjust to it. And I feel like the latter is the better way to go.
Well, and we can get curious about it, right? Because it's like, what did they experience? Mm-hmm. How did they grow up? What was technology like back then? Like, that's a fair question. And it's such a beautiful opportunity to get curious with that other person, to try to understand more about what they experienced in their world while growing up, in their life, that contributes to how they show up. And I think that's valid, like regardless of if it's a younger person or an older person. You and I are very close to the same age. In fact, I think right at this moment in time, we are the same age. You had some wildly different experiences in your life, and we're technically in the same generation. So it's just such a great reminder to get that curiosity out of your back pocket and use it as an opportunity to practice, because the other person, they've experienced some stuff that is fascinating and would be really great to know more about.
Totally agree.
Uh-oh, now we're talking about curiosity. Now it's going to definitely go off in left field. Okay, let's drag it back. Let's pull it back in before I go off on another tangent. I want to talk more about culture, right? How do we take this now that we understand more about what the generational differences look like, what opportunities we have to understand more about individual experiences? Let's kind of make a little shift and think more about how this can affect our culture. Because if it's not a work ethic crisis and it's not a generational problem, it is a design problem, which means we have agency. We can help influence our culture. So one of the first things that I think might make a pretty big difference here is if we redefine the metric by which we measure commitment. And I want to be really honest here, because on paper, I know that there are a lot of clinics out there that are already doing this. And doing this is in quote fingers, because we say that we value teamwork and we value quality care and we value your input and we value your well-being and a work-life balance. But in practice, time sacrifice is what gets rewarded, right? The person who stays late gets praised and recognized. The person who skips lunch is seen as dedicated. The person who always says yes becomes indispensable. I've seen it over and over. Hell, I've actually participated in it. And if you want to talk about things we did as leaders that we weren't proud of, I remember being desperate to cover shifts on a short-staffed team and praising the person that stepped up. to pick up that extra shift, to work an extra 8 hours in their already busy week, I praised them. And I feel kind of bad about it because I think that's where the confusion happens. We say commitment is about quality, but what gets recognized is that endurance and that sacrifice. And the younger generations, Josh, they're watching this happen. So redefining commitment, it's not just about rewriting that value statement. It's auditing what we actually praise and celebrate. What do we point out in team meetings? Who gets recognized? Who gets that shout out? Who is described as the real MVP? And if the answer is, oh, it's the technician that sacrifices the most and comes in on her day off to help Andi out because everybody's short-staffed, then the old metric is absolutely running the show. And if we want to shift that metric, the leaders have got to start modeling it. And you touched on this a little bit already, Josh, and I couldn't agree with you more because culture follows what leaders normalize. I gotta say, one of the things I absolutely appreciate about working with you is that you model these behaviors for us. You work hard, you show up, you prepare, you care deeply, but you know what else? You leave when it's time to leave. You protect your calendar, you take space for yourself when you need it. And because of that, it gives me permission to do the same. Now, when something is urgent, we absolutely jump in and get shit done. If there's a deadline, a crisis, something truly time sensitive, we rally because the difference is that that's the exception, not the expectation. And because it's the exception, we are much more willing to show up 100% when it absolutely matters. And that's our culture here at Flourish. It's not about lowering standards. It's about being intentional about when you must be in you must attend mode and when we are not. If sustainability only exists in policy but not in modeling, then the old metric is totally going to win. But when leaders show that hard work and healthy boundaries can actually coexist, that changes everything. So, Josh, what opportunities do you see here that could help renovate culture in vet med?
Yeah, when it comes to like generational differences and real or perceived and sustainability.
Yeah.
I think you touched on one earlier, which is this idea of curiosity. I think honestly, I think that the generational blame game is just a very lazy approach at simplicity. And I get it because our brains crave simplicity. And when we're under stress and strain, that's precisely where we want to go. It takes intentional effort in the middle of a crazy, chaotic day when you as a manager feel like I've been working my ass off and I haven't had a break in weeks or months, and this damn lazy team, like it takes intentional, real effort to stop yourself and think, okay, maybe they're not being lazy. Maybe there's a reasonable explanation for this behavior. That requires curiosity, right? To find out what could be that reasonable explanation. So one of the things that I think is really important here is to challenge ourselves to assume that everybody has a rational explanation for their observable behavior. And if we can do that, if we can really truly assume that, then we can get actually quite curious about trying to understand what it is. Hey, Andi, it feels like the team really needs a boost right now, really needs some support. And it looks like to me that you're getting ready to clock out here right at 6 when the rest of the team still has some work to do. Can you help me understand what's going on here, right? It is entirely possible that Andi has a perfectly reasonable explanation for why she's doing that. But if I just assume, oh yeah, Andi's just another one of those 22-year-old entitled lazy kids, I'm never going to understand what that reasonable expectation is. Now, there will be some very infrequent cases in which I will discover that this particular individual, not because of the generation they're from, but because who they are as a person, doesn't hold the values that I need them to hold in this workplace to succeed here. But I'm not going to discover that if I'm making assumptions as well. And so I think one of the big things is really starting with curiosity. And then going to your modeling thing, thinking about the things that we espouse, the values that we espouse. We value teamwork here. We value well-being. We value work-life balance. Really clearly defining what are the behaviors that match that, and then learning to celebrate those behaviors. One of the things that I've made a conscious effort to do, I really appreciate the very kind words that you said about how I try and model things here, because it has been a conscious effort. I haven't always been this kind of a person, but I do try and do that. One of the things that I've really thought long and hard about is, what are the things that I want to celebrate here? And I want to celebrate outcomes, not effort. And I want to celebrate self-care, not self-sacrifice. And so I've tried to make like a concerted effort, like, with you in particular, Andi, you post a lot about when you ride your horses. Like you put like, I don't know how many times I've seen a story of the beautiful mane of Boston or Marshall on a hack through, the trails there. I make a concerted effort to like and or even comment on those as often as I possibly can, because that's actually like one of my intentional ways of saying, like, I love that you're doing this. And those stories sometimes pop up, quote unquote, in the middle of a workday. But I want to make sure that that like this is important. It's important to you, so it's important to me. Along with that, with the celebrating outcomes, I've tried to like really make an effort over the last few years, now that there's a team at Flourish, to never celebrate the amount of time that somebody puts into something. I don't ever want you to feel like, hey, Andi, I noticed that you worked 9 hours on that project. Good job. Rather, what I'm trying to do is say, hey, Andi, this presentation, I think is going to have exactly the impact that you want it to have. And here's why. Good job. Because that's the thing that's really important to me, is the outcomes. And so like really thinking about, what does that mean here? Like performance here means outcomes. It means impact. Well-being here means that you find your own unique balance for doing the hard work that needs to be done and doing the things personally that are just as equally important, right? And then I want to celebrate when I see those things happening. I think that's a real opportunity for culture renovation. What do you think?
Oh, I couldn't agree more. And as I sit here and think about that and kind of listen to the way that you explain how our culture works here at Flourish, I'm also trying to think about how that sounds and what that could look like for people that are on the floor, right? In the clinic and doing it in there every day. And yeah, I know that you can't just walk out of the clinic and go hop on your horse and like, that must be nice, Andi. And I'll say, yeah, it is. And there are other ways. There are other ways to show people that you're excited that they got to go out and do the thing that makes them so excited, that you support when they get a chance to go and hang out with their young horse in training, or that they, created something that was fantastic. There are ways to do that, even if you are, in a clinic, in a hospital, looking at each other for 8 hours out of the day and don't have that, flexibility of the work at home type environment. And a lot of that really just, to me, goes back to curiosity,
Totally agree.
Ask about what fills their cup. Ask about what, was meaningful for them over the weekend, and talk about that and celebrate that. And to your point, focus on impacts and outcomes. Gosh, this parvo puppy was kind of circling the drain and everybody rallied, and now he's looking a little bit better and he even ate. That's fantastic. Like, focusing on that as opposed to, thank you so much for staying late. Well, you stayed 2 hours late and now the puppy is eating and feeling better, and stuff. Focusing on that impact is still so possible when you're on the floor in the clinic environment. So that's what
there's 2 quick things I want to add that are sparked by what you're saying. First of all, playing off your curiosity comment, the power of questions. Questions have a really interesting way of driving what comes next, right? Like influencing the conversation. And I think often what we do is we ask questions that sound a bit like this. Hey guys, we need to get everything done today by 6 o'clock. How do we do that? Right. And that it feels like a very reasonable question, and there's nothing wrong with that question necessarily. But what if the question was, hey guys, we need to get everybody out of here by 6 o'clock, given the caseload. How do we do that? Right. It's still the same thing. Still we need to get this caseload done. we want to make sure that we get everybody out by 6 o'clock. How do we do that? Or, hey guys, this is the caseload we're looking at today, and we need to make sure that everybody here gets a half hour out of the building. How do we do that? Right? Like those kinds of questions change the answers that come after. So learning to ask questions in that particular way that are balancing both the work needs and the human needs. And then the second thing is I'm reminded of this tool that Google has called the One Simple Thing worksheet. The One Simple Thing worksheet is something that came out of, I can't remember, it might have been Project Aristotle. I don't know. Actually, I don't think it was. It was one of the research things they did where Google determined that managers at Google were instrumental for, like job satisfaction and engagement within teams. Like that was the most powerful lever that the organization could pull to ensure that people had a good work experience and worked hard, right? Performed well. And so Google created this simple worksheet that managers were coached to give to everybody on the team once a week, once every 2 weeks, whatever works for, for you. And I would love to see this where, we have like, I don't know, the technician manager does this with all their techs, or the shift lead does this with everybody working that day, or whatever it is. And it's just as simple like, Andi, what is something that's important to you personally to accomplish this week? So it could be like, I want to make sure that I get to 2 of my evening dance classes. It could be, I want to make sure that I get 3 workouts in the gym. I want to make sure that I eat a healthy salad once a day, every day that I work, whatever it might be, right? But the point is that you're writing down the simple personal thing that matters to you and then sharing it with somebody with power and status in your organization. Now that person knows, and they know what the one simple thing is for everybody on the team. And now they can, I don't know, maybe do something to help those people achieve those goals. Now imagine if everybody on the team knew what those little goals were, right? Now we're helping each other ensure that Andi gets her salad every day and that Josh gets to go to his, soccer game twice a week, right? So those are things that I think can help too.
Well, and never mind the fact that when you see Andi eating her salad at lunch, you can celebrate that because that's a personal goal and she's doing it. Like, good job, right? Good on you. That kind of thing. Absolutely. I love all of this. I'm walking away with a ton here. And the big thing is that this is not about laziness, right? The data does not support that. What this is about is a recalibration of how work fits into life. And if we mislabel that shift as entitlement, then we're going to miss an opportunity. Because the real work is not fixing a generation. It's renovating culture. It's redefining what commitment looks like. It's being honest about what we reward. And it's deciding when to be in you must attend mode and when to not be. And I keep thinking about that technician who said to me, I love this field way too much to let it consume me. That's not disengagement. That's somebody who's trying to build a career that lasts. Now, speaking of somebody that is trying to build a career on consuming, it is time for this week's Florida Man. Are you ready for this?
I'm so ready.
This week's Florida Man comes to us from good old Ocala, Florida, which is my neck of the woods. I know. And it happened just recently.
Ooh.
Just recently. Shirtless Florida man sentenced for driving through a Taco Bell window while robbing it with a, quote, large rock.
What?
Right? This Florida man has been deemed the Bean Burrito Bandit, and he broke into a Taco Bell through the window and then robbed the workers and the customers armed with a large rock.
Threatening rock. Oh my God.
Give me the burrito or else you get the rock.
The only thing that would have made it better if he was from Boulder, Colorado.
Ah, yes. He'd have access to so many. Oh, God. It was too funny. I kind of was like, oh, it's a local Florida man. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's
awesome. I got excited.
That's a good one. That is a good one. And right down the road from you.
Oh, good. Well, listen, thank you to all of our listeners out there for spending time with us in the Culture Lab. Of course, we will share links to this paper, to the James Herriot series, to the Worldwide Vets Thrive Retreat for everybody to check that out and see how wonderful of an opportunity that is in the show notes. Now, if you've enjoyed this episode, give us a follow, share it with your colleagues, and let us know what you think. And we will see you next time in the Veterinary Culture Lab. Bye. Thanks for hanging out with us in the Veterinary Culture Lab, powered by the science of workplace well-being and brought to you by Flourish Veterinary Consulting. If today's episode sparked an idea, made you smile, or got you thinking, hey, I should totally try that, let us know. What do you think? Be sure to subscribe, share, and remember, a thriving veterinary culture is possible, and you don't have to build it alone.